I swear, it was a mistake. A stupid, thoughtless mistake that turned my entire life into a living nightmare. One moment, I was laughing on the couch, scrolling through my phone, and the next, I sent that picture to my stepdad. Accidentally. Or at least, that's what I keep telling myself. Hi, I'm Emily. I'm 22, a college student, and I swear I'm not the kind of person who gets herself into situations like this. Or at least, I wasn't. My life was pretty normal, boring, even. Until my mom got remarried. Her new husband, Tom, seemed like the perfect guy. Handsome, successful, charming in that effortless way that made people gravitate toward him. I didn't trust him at first. Maybe it was because I've never been close to my mom, and I hated the idea of someone else taking over our already strained dynamic. But Tom? He won me over. He was thoughtful in a way my mom never was, always asking about my classes, my hobbies, my plans for the future. At first, I thought it was just in trying to be a good stepdad. Now I'm not so sure. It all started on an otherwise uneventful night. I was lying on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when my best friend, Ashley, texted me. "Send me something cute," she wrote. "I'm trying to figure out what to wear for Nate tonight." Ashley was always asking for my opinion on stuff like this, and honestly, I didn't mind. It was fun helping her out. So, I got up, fixed my hair in the mirror, and snapped a quick photo. Nothing crazy, just a playful, slightly flirty selfie. I added a caption, something like "How about this vibe?" and hit send without even double-checking. Big mistake. A few minutes later, I got a text back, but it wasn't from Ashley. It was from Tom. My stomach dropped. No. No, no, no. This can't be happening. I opened the message thread, and there it was. The photo. My photo. Sent directly to my stepdad. I froze. My mind was racing, my hands shaking as I stared at the screen. Should I delete it? Apologize? Pretend it didn't happen? Before I could do anything, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Tom. "Don't worry about it. We'll pretend it never happened." Pretend it never happened? That was it? No questions, no awkwardness, no scolding me for being careless? Just a calm, almost casual response? At first, I felt relieved. But then, as I reread his text, that relief turned into something else, something that made my stomach churn. Why wasn't he upset? Why didn't he react like a normal adult would? The next morning, I couldn't even look him in the eye. I avoided breakfast entirely, locking myself in my room until I was sure he'd left for work. But that night, things got weird. Tom didn't say anything about the photo, but he started acting differently. At dinner, he kept looking at me. Not the way a stepdad should look at his stepdaughter. His gaze lingered too long, and when I caught him, he didn't even try to hide it. "Did you have a good day?" he asked, his voice casual, but his tone felt off. I mumbled something about class and quickly excused myself. In the days that followed, it only got worse. He started texting me out of nowhere, things like "How's school going?" or "I saw this show on Netflix you'd probably like." Harmless, on the surface. But it didn't feel harmless. One afternoon, I came home to find a note on the kitchen counter. "Emily, we should talk. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. I just think we should clear the air. Tom." I stared at the note, my heart pounding. What does he mean, clear the air? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything, the photo, his texts, the way he looked at me. Part of me wanted to confront him, to put an end to whatever this was. But another part of me was curious. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't deny it. Tom was attractive, and the attention he gave me was intoxicating in a way I didn't want to admit. The next day, I found him waiting for me in the living room when I got back from class. "Hey," he said, his smile easy, like nothing was wrong. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, but eventually, I sat down across from him. "What is it?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I just want you to know, you don't have to feel embarrassed about the other night." My cheeks burned. "It was a mistake," I said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he interrupted. "But I think we both know there's something more here." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" "Emily," he said softly, his voice calm but deliberate. "I feel like we have a connection. Something your mom wouldn't understand." I stared at him, completely speechless. Was he seriously saying this? "Tom," I said finally, my voice trembling. "You're married to my mom. This is insane." He nodded, his expression almost sad. "I know it's complicated. But I can't help how I feel. And I don't think you can either." I stood up, my hands shaking. "This conversation is over," I said, heading for the door. But before I could leave, he said something that stopped me in my tracks. "I'll respect whatever you decide," he said. "But just know, I'm here. If you ever need someone who truly understands you." I didn't look back. I walked out of the room and slammed the door behind me. But as much as I wanted to forget everything he'd said, his words stayed with me. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't the end. I froze, staring at my phone. My pulse pounded in my ears as I saw the dreaded delivered notification. My fingers trembled, hovering over the screen as I desperately tried to think of a way to undo what had just happened. I'd sent that picture to Tom. My stepdad. I panicked, scrolling frantically, looking for some sort of cancel button, but it was too late. The damage was done. My heart sank deeper with every passing second, and then, my phone buzzed. His response was short, almost unnervingly calm. "Don't worry about it. Let's just forget it happened." Forget it? Was that supposed to reassure me? His words felt cold, calculated, like they hid something he wasn't saying. That night, I stayed locked in my room, refusing to come out even when my mom called me for dinner. My mind raced with questions. Was he mad? Embarrassed? Would he tell her? But when I finally forced myself to face him the next day, something about him had changed. Tom acted normal, maybe even a little too normal. But I noticed things I hadn't before. His eyes lingered on me just a little longer than they should have. His tone was softer when he spoke to me, almost too familiar. And when he laughed at my jokes during dinner, it wasn't the polite chuckle I was used to, it was something else entirely. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining things. But the tension between us was undeniable. I avoided eye contact, avoided being in the same room as him for too long. Every time I walked past him, I felt his gaze on me. It was suffocating. Should I tell my mom? The thought crossed my mind more than once, but what would I even say? "Hey, Mom, your husband is acting weird because I accidentally sent him a photo I wasn't supposed to?" She'd blame me, not him. And deep down, I wasn't ready to deal with what would happen if I did. The next morning, I found a note sitting on the kitchen counter. "Emily, we need to talk. You're not in trouble, but I think we're on the same page about a lot of things. Tom." My stomach churned as I read the words over and over again. Same page about what? I shoved the note into my pocket before my mom could see it, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to think, what to feel. A mix of fear and curiosity tugged at me, and I hated myself for even considering what he might mean. That night, I avoided him as much as I could, retreating to my room and pretending to study. But my mind kept circling back to his note. What does he mean? Does he think I wanted this? I hated the way my thoughts spiraled, hated the way a small, dark part of me felt intrigued. It was wrong, I knew that, but there was something about the way he looked at me, the way he seemed so confident, that left me unable to think straight. This wasn't over. I could feel it. And I had no idea what to do next. I didn't want to go. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to ignore his message and stay home. But curiosity got the better of me. His note kept replaying in my mind. We need to talk, just us. When he sent me the address, my stomach flipped. A hotel? Out of town? This wasn't just a conversation, this was something else entirely. I told myself I was going there to confront him, to put an end to whatever this was before it spiraled further out of control. But as I parked my car and walked toward the door he'd mentioned, I couldn't ignore the knot of nerves, and something else, that twisted in my chest. He opened the door as soon as I knocked, his expression calm, like he had been expecting me for hours. "Emily," he said softly, his voice smooth as ever. "I'm glad you came." "I don't know why I'm here," I blurted, crossing my arms defensively. "What do you want, Tom?" "Just to talk," he said, gesturing toward the small table in the corner of the room. A bottle of wine sat there, 2 glasses already poured. No pressure, no expectations. Just a conversation. His tone was reassuring, but the atmosphere in the room was anything but innocent. The air felt heavy, charged, and I hated how aware I was of everything: the soft lighting, the faint scent of his cologne, the way his eyes seemed to linger on me just a second too long. I stayed near the door, refusing to sit. "Say whatever you need to say," I snapped. "I don't have all day." He didn't seem fazed by my tone. Instead, he sat down at the table, leaning back in his chair like he had all the time in the world. "I wanted to clear the air," he began. "About everything. The photo, the messages of us." "There is no us," I shot back. He smiled, a small, almost knowing smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "That's not entirely true, is it?" I glared at him, my hands shaking. "What are you talking about?" "Emily," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "I've tried to ignore this, to tell myself it's just in my head. But I can't anymore. I care about you more than I should. And I think you feel it too." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Are you serious right now? You're married to my mom, Tom. This is insane." "I know," he admitted, his expression softening. "But that doesn't change how I feel. And let's be honest, you've been sending mixed signals, haven't you?" "What?" My voice cracked, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You think I wanted this?" He stood, slowly closing the space between us. I backed away instinctively, my heart pounding. "I don't think you planned it," he said softly. "But you didn't stop it either. You came here. You're standing here, right now, listening to me." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "And the worst part?" I couldn't deny them. "This is wrong," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I know," he replied, his tone calm. "But it doesn't have to go any further than this. No one has to know. It can stay between us, if you want it to." I wanted to scream, to tell him he was disgusting, to walk out the door and never look back. But instead, I froze. My body wouldn't move, my words caught in my throat. Because as much as I hated to admit it, a small, dark part of me didn't want to leave. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at him, trapped between fear and something else I couldn't name. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "I need to go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped back, giving me space. "Of course. I'll respect whatever you decide." But as I turned to leave, his next words stopped me in my tracks. "Just remember," he said softly. "I'm here if you change your mind." I walked out without looking back, my heart racing, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and anger. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. I don't know when exactly it started. Maybe it was that night at the hotel when I saw the way he looked at me, or maybe it was something deeper, something I didn't want to admit. But over the next few days, I began to test the waters. At first, it was subtle. I'd wear a slightly shorter dress, cross my legs in his line of sight, or let my hair fall in just the right way when he was around. Nothing blatant, just enough to see if he'd notice. And he did. His glances became longer, lingering a moment too long. His compliments became more personal, more loaded. "You look beautiful today," he'd say, his voice low enough that only I could hear. It felt dangerous, but that's what made it so thrilling. One evening, I walked into the living room wearing a fitted tank top and shorts. I told myself it was just because it was hot in the house, but deep down, I knew better. Tom was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. When he saw me, his eyes flicked up, just for a second, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. "You're staying in tonight?" he asked casually, his tone neutral. "Yeah," I replied, plopping down on the opposite end of the couch. "Nothing else to do?" He nodded, but his focus wasn't on his phone anymore. I could feel his eyes on me, even as I pretended to scroll through my own. As the days passed, the tension between us became almost unbearable. I didn't know why I was doing it, why I was pushing him like this. Maybe it was because I liked the power, the control. Maybe it was because it felt like a game I could win. But the game escalated one night when my mom went out of town for a work trip. It was just the two of us in the house. I poured myself a glass of wine, telling myself it was to unwind, but as the buzz set in, I knew it was lowering my inhibitions in ways I wasn't ready to admit. Tom was in the kitchen when I walked in, holding his own glass of wine. "Late night?" I asked, leaning casually against the counter. He smiled, that same calm, easy smile that always unnerved me. "Couldn't sleep." "Me neither," I said, taking a sip. Funny how that works. The air between us was thick with something unsaid. I moved closer to him, setting my glass on the counter. "Tom," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Emily, don't." "Don't what?" I asked, stepping closer. My heart was pounding, but I didn't stop. "You know what," he said, his voice strained. "This is wrong." "Then why aren't you moving?" I shot back, my voice more confident than I felt. For a moment, neither of us moved. The tension was unbearable, the silence deafening. Finally, he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Because I don't trust myself," he admitted, his voice raw. I should have stopped. I should have walked away right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. "Maybe you don't have to." For a second, I thought he was going to give in. His eyes searched mine, filled with a mix of desire and guilt. But then, he shook his head, stepping back again. "Go to bed, Emily," he said firmly. I stared at him, my cheeks burning with humiliation and frustration. Without another word, I grabbed my glass and stormed out of the kitchen, my mind racing. As I lay in bed that night, replaying every moment in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And worse, I didn't know if I even wanted to. That night, the house was silent. My mom was still away, and it was just Tom and me. The air felt heavier than usual, like something was about to happen, but neither of us wanted to admit it. I poured myself another glass of wine, trying to drown out the nagging voice in my head that kept telling me to stop, to go back to my room and pretend none of this was happening. But I didn't. Tom was sitting on the couch, his own glass in hand, his eyes fixed on the TV. Or at least, pretending to be. I could tell he wasn't really watching. Neither was I. "Can I sit here?" I asked, gesturing to the seat beside him. He hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "Of course." I sank into the couch, closer than I probably should have been, but I didn't care. The tension between us had been building for weeks, and it felt like it was reaching its breaking point. We started talking about nothing, really. Work, school, life. But there was an undertone to everything we said, a weight that neither of us could ignore. At one point, I caught him looking at me, his gaze lingering a little too long. "What?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Nothing," he said quickly, turning back to the TV. But his voice betrayed him. "Tom," I said, leaning closer, my heart pounding. "Don't lie to me." He exhaled deeply, setting his glass down on the table. "This isn't a good idea, Emily." "What isn't?" I asked, knowing full well what he meant. "This," he said, gesturing between us. "Whatever this is." I should have stopped. I should have agreed and walked away. But instead, I moved even closer, until our knees were almost touching. "Then why haven't you stopped it?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The look he gave me wasn't just one of desire, it was something deeper, something more dangerous. "Because I can't," he admitted, his voice raw, almost pained. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was me. But suddenly, the space between us disappeared. His hand brushed against mine, tentative at first, as if testing the waters. When I didn't pull away, he let it linger, his fingers lightly tracing my skin. My breath hitched, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. "Emily," he murmured, his voice low and strained. "This is wrong." "I know," I whispered back, leaning closer until I could feel his breath on my skin. "But it doesn't feel wrong." He hesitated, his gaze searching mine, as if looking for a reason to stop. But he didn't find one. In that moment, all the tension, all the stolen glances, all the unspoken words between us came to a head. We crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The next morning, I woke up in my bed, the events of the night before crashing over me like a wave. My heart sank as I replayed everything in my head, the wine, the touches, the whispered words. I wanted to believe it wasn't real, that it had all been some sort of twisted dream. But the truth was undeniable. It happened. Tom was in the kitchen when I finally worked up the courage to leave my room. He was making coffee, his movements casual, like it was just another day. "Morning," he said, his tone light, almost too normal. "Morning," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me then, his expression unreadable. "Are you okay?" "No," I said honestly, the weight of my guilt pressing down on me. "Emily," he said softly, stepping closer. "What happened? It doesn't have to change anything. We can keep this between us." His words made my stomach turn. Keep this between us? Pretend like nothing happened? I wanted to scream, to tell him that it wasn't that simple. But I couldn't find the words. As the days went on, the guilt only grew. Tom acted like nothing had happened, like everything was fine. But I couldn't. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without feeling like I'd destroyed something I could never fix. I wanted to turn back time, to undo everything. But it was too late. Our secret had already changed everything. When my mom came back from her trip, I could tell right away that something was off. She was unusually quiet, her eyes scanning me and Tom like she was piecing together a puzzle no one else could see. I thought I could handle it, thought I could play along like nothing had changed. But she knew. It started with the small things, questions that seemed innocent on the surface but were loaded with suspicion. "How was your weekend? Did anything interesting happen while I was gone?" I dodged them as best as I could, but my nerves must have shown. She became more distant, colder, and then, she found my phone. I'd been careless, too distracted by my guilt to delete the texts. And when she saw them, everything unraveled. "Emily," she screamed, storming into my room, waving my phone in the air. "What the hell is this?" I froze, my heart pounding. "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what?" she snapped, her voice shaking with rage. "That you've been sneaking around with my husband?" Tears welled up in my eyes, but I couldn't speak. What could I say? Tom walked in then, his face pale but composed. "Linda, calm down," he said, trying to take the phone from her. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down," she screamed, pulling away from him. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" "It's not what you think," he said, his voice steady, like he was trying to talk her down. But she wasn't having it. "Get out," she spat, her voice cold and final. "Both of you. Out of my house. Now." I tried to plead with her, to explain, but she wouldn't listen. "You're not my daughter," she said, her words cutting deeper than I thought possible. "You're a disgrace." She threw my things into a suitcase and shoved me out the door. Tom left too, but not before trying to say something to me. I couldn't even look at him. What followed was a whirlwind. My mom didn't stop at kicking us out. She filed for divorce immediately, telling everyone who would listen about Tom's betrayal and my role in it. I became the villain of her story. Tom, for his part, didn't take the fallout well. At first, he tried to lay low, but as the whispers and judgment grew louder, he turned his anger on me. He started contacting my friends, my classmates, anyone who would listen. He told them his version of the story, painting me as the one who had seduced him, who had ruined his life. "Emily isn't as innocent as she seems," he told them. "You have no idea what she's capable of." It didn't take long for the rumors to spread. People I thought I could trust turned their backs on me. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, some filled with disgust, others with mockery. "You're disgusting. Is it true you slept with your stepdad? Wow, Emily, didn't think you'd stoop this low." I felt like I was drowning, like there was no escape from the walls closing in around me. One night, I confronted Tom. I found him at the motel he'd been staying at and demanded answers. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "You're the one who ruined everything. Why are you trying to destroy me?" He didn't flinch. "You think you're innocent in all this?" he asked, his tone cold. "You wanted this just as much as I did. Don't pretend you didn't." His words hit me like a slap. I felt a surge of anger, of shame, of regret. "You're a coward," I spat. "You couldn't handle your own mistakes, so you're trying to pin them on me." He just shrugged. "Believe what you want. But this isn't my fault. It's ours." I left that night feeling more broken than ever. My life, my relationships, my reputation, everything was in ruins. My mom would never forgive me. My friends didn't believe me. And Tom, he was a constant reminder of everything I'd lost. But this wasn't the end. The secrets, the lies, the fallout, they were only just beginning. I left town as soon as I could. I packed what little I had left, deleted every trace of my social media, and moved to a city where no one knew me. I thought a fresh start would be the answer, but I was wrong. No matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape it. The whispers, the judgment, the looks, I carried them with me. It wasn't just about what people thought, it was about what I thought. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had let one mistake spiral into something that destroyed everything she loved. I heard Tom moved, too. He's in another state now, trying to piece together what's left of his life. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks about me, if he feels even a fraction of the guilt I do. But does it even matter? The damage is done. Looking back, I see it all so clearly now. How one impulsive action led to another, and then another, until everything fell apart. I see the signs I ignored, the choices I shouldn't have made, and the consequences I couldn't avoid. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: a single moment, a single mistake, can change your life forever. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I don't want forgiveness or understanding. I'm telling it because I hope someone, anyone, can learn from my mistakes. So let me ask you this. Have you ever made a mistake you wish you could take back? One that changed everything? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. And that's it. That's my story. Or at least, what I can bring myself to share. The rest? Well, that's for me to live with.